Hello everyone, we're going to be doing some genetics review with all of the different problems that you've learned how to complete during the genetics unit. Test is coming up. So I'm going to be moving back and forth between this Jamboard where I can work the problems. You've been given the handout that goes with it. And there's also slides, Google Slides, located on your Google Classroom that also go with this and have the problems, plus some flashcards for some of the terms at the end. So I'll be moving back and forth. This is our Chapter 12 test from the Red Biology book. We'll look at genetic terms, pedigrees, chromosomes, Punnett squares, which include the different types of problems, such as complete dominance, incomplete and codominance, and sex-linked or X-linked problems. All right, so follow along on your worksheet, and I'll be completing these problems. And so in some instances, I'll do the problems for you and then ask the questions, or later on, then you'll do the problems and then answer the questions, and then I'll show you whether or not you did them correctly. All right, so let's start with number 1. In pea plants, Gregor Mendel, the father of genetics, did a lot of experiments with pea plants. He found that tall is a dominant trait. If a plant is homozygous for tall and is crossed with one that's homozygous for dwarf, that means short, what would be the phenotype of the F1? Sometimes I like to make a little key for myself, and I like to pick letters to specify the genotypes I'm going to use to show the phenotypes. So I'm going to use a capital T for tall, and then I'm going to use a lowercase t for dwarf or short. So it says pea plant is homozygous for tall. That would be big T for its genotype, keeping in mind that tall is its phenotype. I'm crossing it with one that's homozygous for dwarf, which would be little t, little t. Fill in the boxes. And don't forget to do this on your paper. So homozygous tall crossed with homozygous dwarf. What's the phenotype of the F1? Well, 100% of them are tall because the dominant allele big T is in each of the boxes. In fact, I wouldn't even have to do this problem with the Punnett square. You could also think of it this way, big T times little t. And if you think about how each parent can only give one allele to its offspring, which happens during meiosis, then I know that this parent can only give a big T. That's all it has to give. And this one can only give a little t. So then I know 100% of the offspring will be big T, little t. Now it asks us about what will the F2 generation be. Well, in the F2 generation, what Mendel did was cross 2 of the F1s. So that would be a big T, little t. Doesn't matter who I pick because they're all the same. Big T, big or little t here. So this is going to give me a little more variety when I cross 2 heterozygotes. All right, so here's the F2 or second generation right here. So what will I expect for the phenotype? Well, 3/4 will be tall, 1/4 dwarf. So that's for the phenotypes. I could also answer for what do I expect for the genotypes. So that's where it would be 1/4 big T, 1/2 big T, little t, and 1/4 little t. So remember, when answering for genotypes, you're using letters. Phenotypes, you're using what the physical characteristic looks like. Let's move on to the next problem. 4 o'clock flowers show codominance. So this is a different type of problem than the last one. If a red flowered 4 o'clock is crossed with a white flowered one, what will be the color of the F1 generation, or the first generation? Well, remember in codominance, both alleles are dominant together. So red is going to get a big R, and white is going to get a big W. They're both dominant. I think they deserve their own capital letters. Keeping in mind that there are other ways to do this, that some people still use, like the big R, little r, but then you have to remember when they're heterozygous that you get that different look. And some individuals use superscripts for these problems as well. But I'm just going to use 2 different capital letters. So I'm crossing a red 4 o'clock. The only way a 4 o'clock can be red is if it has 2 capital R's. Crossing it with a white. The only way it can be white, again, 2 capital W's, so they're both homozygous or purebred. So I will expect, let's see, it's going to ask us what will be the flower color. So they want phenotype in this question. When doing these problems, always make sure you know whether they're asking for phenotype or genotype or both. In this case, it's asking for the flower color. So that's phenotype. So 100% of them are going to be pink. Remember that in codominance problems, the heterozygote has a different color or different blend, or shows both phenotypes. Okay, this is pink. And if I was going to answer this question, I would say 100% pink. There we go, just draw an arrow. Let's move on to the next problem. Sickle cell anemia is codominant with normal blood cells. Having 2 copies of the sickle cell gene makes red blood cells curl up when a person exercises. Heterozygotes only exhibit partial sickling, so they're not considered sick. All right, so this is for basically a mutated hemoglobin gene. So we can pick whatever letters we want. How about we use a big H for normal hemoglobin? Remember, hemoglobin is the protein on your red blood cells that carries oxygen. Then I'm going to pick a big S for the mutated hemoglobin, which causes the disease called sickle cell anemia. Makes your red blood cells curl up like a banana. That is not good. That's not going to carry oxygen very well, and it can clog your vessels too. So we have a heterozygote marrying another heterozygote. So in this case, like this. Okay, then you fill in the boxes. Remember to do that on your sheet. Remember, heterozygotes, moved there. Heterozygotes are not considered sick. Because they still make enough normal hemoglobin where they're fine. The only way to be considered sick and actually have the disease is to have this genotype. So the probability they'll have a child with sickle cell anemia is 1 out of 4, or 25%. The big H homozygous for normal, they're fine. Heterozygotes are fine. SS, they've got the disease. All right, back to regular complete dominance problem. Brown color in mice is dominant over gray. So I like to do my key over here. brown is dominant over gray because this is regular complete dominance problems. Then I'm going to use the same letters where the dominant gene gets the capital and the recessive gene gets the lowercase. In a given cross between a brown mouse and a gray mouse, well, I can fill that in. The gray mouse has got to be little b. That's the only way it can be gray. And then the brown mouse, I know there's at least one big B, but I'm going to read a little bit more to find out what the second letter is going to be. Because it's either going to be a big B or a little b. Let's see if the rest of the question can tell us what that will be. In a given cross between a brown and a gray mouse, 5 of the offsprings are brown. Well, that doesn't tell me anything, but 5 are also gray. So the only way to get gray offspring is that they would be little b's. So that means this parent has to be little b. So here's filling in the rest of their boxes. Looks like they'd have a 50% chance of having gray babies and 50% chance of having brown babies, which fits the data in the question. On to number 5. Here's an X-linked or sex-linked problem. Color blindness is a sex-linked trait. In fact, remember it's X-linked recessive on the X chromosome. A woman of normal vision whose father was colorblind marries a man of normal vision. What type of vision will be expected in their children? Well, let's go ahead and put our X's and Y's on here. Since this is an X-linked problem, we have to use superscripts. Also, don't forget there is no gene for color blindness on the Y chromosome. It just goes along for the ride to tell us who the males are. All right, it says the woman has normal vision. So I'm going to use a big R for normal. And then I'm going to use a little r for red-green color blindness. Let's go red-green blind. So she has normal vision. That tells me she's got at least one big R. But it says her father was colorblind. Here's her father. He had to have a little allele. And that's the only one that he can give her, because if he gives her the Y, she would have been a boy. All right, so we'll pass that little R up here. It says the male has normal vision. He gets a big R. Go ahead and fill in the boxes. Always write the dominant one first. And it looks like, well, you can answer for all of the boxes, 3/4 of them or 75%, normal vision, 1/4 colorblind. Or you can answer separately for daughters versus sons. Looks like daughters, 100% chance they'll have normal vision. For sons, it's a 1 out of 2 or 50% chance that they have color blindness. Question number 6. In people, hemophilia is a recessive X-linked characteristic. Right, so big H I'm going to use for normal. Again, it doesn't matter what letters you use as long as your dominant gene gets the big letter and your recessive gene gets the lowercase letter. Little h, hemophilia. So, X-linked recessive, if a normal woman married a normal man. All right, let's put these on here. Find you get faster as you do the problems. half their sons are hemophiliacs, what would be the genotypes of all the people involved? All right, well, what does the female have to be in order to have sons who are hemophiliacs? If you said big H, little h, you were correct. What does the father have to be? Well, it says he was normal, so he has to have a big H. Remember, nothing on the Y. So it looks like 100% of their daughters will present as normal, whereas 50% of their sons, or 1/2, have hemophilia, which is what our question asks. So it looks like we figured it out. On to number 7, polydactyly. This is the presence of an extra finger, or sometimes extra fingers. It's due to a dominant factor. Doesn't that sound like fun? I'm going to use a big D. A big D is polydactyly. So that means a little d is normal. See the tail passing here? My cat keeps walking in front of my screen. All right, so when one parent is polydactylous and the other parent is normal, what's the probability of having a normal child? Well, it says one parent is normal, so we know they have to be little d, little d. The other parent is polydactyly. That really doesn't tell us what the other letter is going to be here. At least I know this one. Got some polydactylous children. Only if the other parent here who's polydactylous is heterozygous will we get children who are, or who have the normal number of fingers. Number 8, in guinea pigs, black fur is dominant over white. So I'm going to do a big B is black. And a little b is white. Construct a Punnett square in which a homozygous dominant pig is crossed with a homozygous recessive pig. What's the probability the offspring will have white fur? All right, homozygous dominant. What letters would that be? You said big B, you are correct. Homozygous recessive, what letters? You said little b, you were correct. Now fill in your boxes. What's the probability the offspring will have white fur? If you said 0, then you were correct. 100% will be black. Number 9, in dogs, wire hair is dominant to smooth hair. I'll use a big W for wire hair. Be careful when using letters like W's, because your little ones and your big ones could look about the same, so make sure to over-exaggerate the big one and the little one. Two wire-haired dogs produce a wire-haired pup. A test cross would be needed to determine whether the pup was homozygous or heterozygous for the dominant trait. So show the Punnett square for this test cross. So basically we have two wire-haired dogs. So we know that both of those parents have to have at least one big W. right? So then they have, let's see here, a wire-haired pup. So now what we want to know, is the pup big W, or did the parents have the little w here, and is the pup big W, little w? So what we're going to have to do is do a test cross with the pup once it grows up with another dog who is homozygous recessive, for one that we know is homozygous recessive. So that would look like, oops, that's not a good spot. Look like this. So here's our pup in question. We know the pup is big W something, but that's what we want to find out. This is commonly done in breeding programs for domesticated animals. So we're going to cross it with something that we know for sure. A smooth-haired pup, or smooth-haired adult, has to be little w. So, well, this would be no surprise here, all wire-haired puppies, but if we get 100% wire-haired puppies, we know that our dog in question had a big W here and got this. This was a big W, it would override all these little W's. But if there is a little W here, well, then there's a chance I would expect 50% of the pups to be smooth-haired. So then I would know that our dog is heterozygous. So that's called a test cross. Obviously, you have to wait till it grows up and then mate it with an individual who is homozygous recessive, which would be for smooth fur in this case. Number 10, erminate chickens, black feathers and white feathers are codominant. All right, so the other type of problem here. So that means I'm going to give a big B for black. And I'm going to give a big W for white. Both of these are codominant alleles. They both deserve their own capital letters. Again, keeping in mind there's other ways that people do these problems. This is the way that I do them. A chicken with black feathers is crossed with a white feathered chicken. Only way they can be their colors is to be homozygous dominant for both. What percent will be heterozygous and be spotted? Codominance. Both traits show up. So what is the answer? If you said 100%, then you would be correct. We're almost there. Number 11. In humans, albinism is recessive to normal pigmentation. So I'll use a capital A for normal, and I'll use a little a for albino. This is an absence of pigment in your skin and in other places, like in your eyes. If a normal appearing woman, well, to be normal, you have to have at least a big A, right? A normal appearing woman marries an albino man, well, they have to be little a. What's the genotype of the mother? Oh, the first child is albino. So the only way that we can get an albino child is, what's mom's other letter here? If you said a little a, you were correct. So it looks like there's a 50% chance that they're going to get albino children and a 50% chance normal pigment. Here's a codominance problem with blood type. Remember, with blood type, A and B are both dominant together, codominant, and O is recessive. What must be the genotypes of two parents if they have a child with O and another with AB? So we know that one parent has to be A and the other parent has to be B in order to have an AB child. But what about having an O child? What must be the other letter for both? If you said O, you were correct. They can also have a 1/4 chance of having a B child and a 1/4 chance of having an A child. All right, and finally, here's our last one. This one's a little more complex, a little more challenge for you. It's a regular Mendelian or complete dominance problem. Hornless trait in cattle is dominant. Kind of like cows not to have horns. When they chase you, it's a little less painful if they get you. And then a little h will be horned. A certain hornless bull is mated to 3 cows. Cow A is horned, gives birth to a hornless calf. Cow B is horned, gives birth to a horned calf. Cow C is hornless, gives birth to a horned calf. What are the genotypes of the 4 parents? All right, that can get confusing, but if you take each Punnett square by itself, then it can slow you down and help you answer the question. So let's look at the bull first, a hornless bull. So for the bull, he's hornless. So we know, I'm going to put the bull on all of the Punnett squares here on the side. And we know he has at least one big H, one dominant allele. We have to figure out, though, what is his other letter. From looking at the cows that he mates with and the types of calves he has in each situation, we'll see if we can figure that out, plus figure out the cows as well. So, cow A is horned. Well, that's easy, right? What's cow A's genotype? Has to be little h, little h. And she has a hornless calf. Well, that actually doesn't tell us much because I don't need to know the bull's other letter to answer that question because I already got 2 boxes that have hornless in them. Let's move on to cow B. Cow B is horned. Oh, that's easy as well. What's cow B's genotype? You said little h, little h. Correct? But cow B has a horned calf. So in order to have a horned calf, you can't answer that from these boxes. What must be the bull's other letter to have a horned calf? Definitely has to be a little h, right? Then it works out. Let's see, cow C. So we've got the bull now. We've got cow A and B. Now we need cow C. That's their Punnett square on the end here. Cow C is hornless, so we know has to have one big H. Has a horned calf, little h, little h. Well, filling in what I know, the only way to have a little h would be cow C has to have a little h. And there we go. That's the only way that it can have a horned calf here. So we've got the bull is big H, little h. Cow A and cow B are 2 little h's, and cow C is just like the bull, big H, little h. All right, so expect to see problems like that on your upcoming test. Make sure you filled in your worksheet. And then there's the slideshow, which these 13 slides here have those problems. But then if you go down to about slide 19 and you run it on slideshow mode, which that doesn't work for me here on this computer, but run it on slideshow mode, and then this will run like flashcards where you read the description and try to fill in the blank, and then the answer will pop up. All right, now it should work out. So when the alleles for a trait are not the same, big T, or big G, little g, the organism is blank for that characteristic. The answer is, click and you'll get heterozygous. Next one, when both alleles are the same, big T, or little g, the organism is blank for that characteristic. Answer is homozygous. The trait that is expressed only when an individual has two copies of it or the dominant allele is not present. It's a recessive trait. The trait that's expressed whenever that allele is present. Answer is dominant trait. The genetic makeup, all the alleles, is called the blank of the organism. Answer is genotype. The blank is the appearance of the organism. Answer is phenotype. A segment of DNA that controls a particular trait is called a, answer is gene. A different version of a gene is gives you a clue it's going to start with a vowel. Answer is allele. The type of genes or alleles that reproductive cells receive is based on the principle of, answer is independent assortment. That's during meiosis, when the alleles from your mom and dad are mixed up and you get them independently assorted into the sperm and egg that made you. The offspring of the parental generation, or P1, are also called the F1 generation. The offspring resulting in a cross between two F1 individuals is called the F2 generation. Known as the father of genetics, answer is Gregor Mendel. The chance a given event will occur is called, answer is probability. That's what you use when you answer Punnett square questions, such as 25% or 1 out of 4, 1/4 of the offspring will have a trait. A cross between two individuals involving only one pair of alleles is called a, answer is monohybrid cross. A diagram that's useful in predicting genetic probabilities is called a what? Punnett square. Not all alleles show dominance over their contrasting allele. When this condition occurs, it's called, or incomplete dominance. Answer is codominance. DNA wraps itself around proteins during meiosis to form a what? Answer is chromosome. This type of cell division produces gametes, or the sperm and egg. Answer is meiosis, or some people call it meiosis. Genes can be found on what structures in cells? Answer is chromosomes. A visual diagram that shows a trait and its inheritance in a family is called what? Answer, pedigree. Gene on the X or Y chromosome is called what? Sex-linked gene, or an X-linked gene, or a Y-linked gene, which we did not do any Y-linked problems, just ones from the X chromosome. All right, so that PowerPoint, or excuse me, Google slideshow is available in your Google Classroom. So be sure to use that as flashcards to review some of the vocabulary from the chapter. And let me know if you have any questions.